Welcome, everyone, to What the Force. I'm Marie-Claire Gould, your host, and joining me for this exciting, interesting, wonderful episode of The Power of Myth and Symbolism in Star Wars is my good friend and yours, Michelle Whitlich.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. So excited to be back.
Welcome back.
Yeah, I know. I'm so excited.
You are like the perfect person to come in and talk about this topic because it's one of your favorite topics, I think, on your own podcast.
Yeah, the word gets tossed around quite a bit, I would say.
Yeah. And so, this is an interesting thing we're going to be talking about, the concept and the idea behind the mythic motif of caves, which connects to the underworld. And we will talk about that just in a second as I give some sort of historical and sacred story context, mythological context to what this has meant for humans since the beginning of time. And then we're going to dig into caves in Star Wars and how they keep on popping up, even though this is a space show, isn't it?
Inner space also, apparently.
Inner space is just as important. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Just as a reminder to go back and listen to my Power of Myth and Symbolism, the Underworld episode. I'll link it to you in the liner notes if you haven't. It's a really good intro into the mythic motifs of the Underworld and why they're super important, especially in Star Wars. Almost any time a character experiences a transformation, an Underworld is to blame.
Yeah, she's underselling it. It's kind of a pivotal, I wouldn't even say really good. It's pivotal. If you're watching a Star Wars, chances are very, very good there's going to be a cave. I've realized this in my general research for this episode. There are so many. You could probably do a whole series on this, Marie-Claire. I know.
I know. Well, like the Underworld. This is what I'm doing. Actually, this is a whole series on the Underworld in Star Wars.
Right.
Yeah, but like the Underworld idea. So what we're talking about is what Joseph Campbell talked about when he said that people leave the known and go into the unknown. And that is the unconscious of yourself, as well as it connects to the mythic motif of the underworld that we hear in stories like Greek mythology or Norse mythology or Chinese mythology. It's everywhere with us as humans. And when we experience transformation, there is a connection to us dying and then being reborn, usually in a cave-like place.
It's so cool. I mean, I sound dumb just saying that it's so cool, but it really is. And that, the connection with caves and wombs, because that's the word that gets said on my podcast. Like every 5 minutes, that's a womb. Well, That's a womb. It's like that's what it is. It's like we as women, we carry around a little cave.
Yeah,
inside of us. It's a very cool topic to think about, and how
and everybody goes back to this place that we all came from.
Right.
Whether or not you're a woman or not, we all go to this like place where we can be reborn. And caves are associated with life and death in almost all cultures globally. They represent this archetypical other world where miraculous transformations can happen. And they are a place of, most importantly, spiritual death and rebirth. In all cultures, there have been caves as a symbol of creation. And, often they're connected with, connection with celestial bodies or the great womb of the earth and sky. It's a symbol of life and death. It's a sacred place that constitutes breaking into sacred space, the cosmic realm, or the barrier between us and the spirits. Often caves have been used from the time of the Great Flood in Europe, which did happen, although it wasn't probably to the extent that certain sacred stories say. Caves were used as a place to shelter people, and thus cave art emerged during that period of time. And there's a tie to it being an entry into this primordial mother goddess's inner self, right? So like you said, like the womb of her, right? And it's where in Greek mythology we hear stories of Gaia, being brought forth from chaos, and then that connects to us by being the eternal mother of everything, the Titans, eventually that brought forth the Olympians and brought forth everything. And everything that we know exists from the fact that we are connected to Mother Earth.
Primordial is the word that always comes to my mind. Well, womb comes to my mind first, but then the second word that comes to my mind is primordial. And very interestingly, I just saw an article that they have found in a cave in France, Neanderthal art in a cave. So it's not even just humans.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. I think.
Yeah. And it's, it's not just Greek mythology, Egyptian mythology, although the source of life primarily came from the Nile. The source of the Nile was a cave. And there was a huge snake that coiled around that cave to protect it. Ancient Aztec beliefs that the lands were fertilized by the water goddess's womb. There was sacred grottos in Afghanistan. In Chinese mythology, there was cave heavens, which were part of Taoist belief that you could actually move into sort of the other realm by going through certain caves. And inhabitants of caves lived in harmony with nature. There's, of course, caves in the Bible, multiple. Lazarus, Jesus.
Yeah.
Right?
Lots and lots of cave symbolism in the Bible.
If you look around, you will find the earth connected with, the success of humans. It's a deep old symbol. It's a deep old motif, but it's also connected with death, right? So being inside of the earth is to be buried, and it connects us with the idea of hell or Hades or the underworld, right? You are dead if you are in the earth, but you are also able to be reborn. Joseph Campbell has this amazing quote, and he says, "The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek."
That's a good one. Put it on a shirt, Marie Claire.
The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. Yeah, I think the Joseph Campbell Foundation might have got that one under
have
wraps.
merch.
Yeah, maybe.
I'll have to look it up because that's a good one.
And so this brings us to Star Wars in a huge way, because although there isn't caves necessarily in A New Hope, they come back in a big way in Empire Strikes Back. And Empire Strikes Back introduces two specific caves that I want to start talking about, and then we'll dig into other examples where we will not hit all of them. There is too many now because
there's just too many.
How wide and varied Star Wars has become. But I do think that once we start to talk about the repetition in Star Wars and the motif itself, it will help you spot it and be like, something important is happening in this location. Is that a good introduction?
Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect introduction.
Let's talk about Dagobah.
Excuse me. Let's talk about Dagobah. Dagobah, the OG. As I sit here with my not less than 7 pages of notes on Star Wars caves, because there were some that I had forgot it even existed. Like you, right before we started recording, you're like, well, what about this one? I'm like, I've been thinking about this all day and I forgot about those. Like, those are big ones and I forgot about those. But Dagobah, I guess technically it's not the OG. I guess the Wampa Cave is the OG, but
there's a cave, in there. Yeah, I was actually thinking of the Exogorth. So there's 3 caves.
Oh God, there's 3. See what
there's 3.
See what I mean? There's 3.
This is why we discuss, but I mean, hey, let's just quickly talk about the Wampa Cave because that's actually really cool. So, Luke goes in there actually dead because
he's lunch, literally going to be lunch.
He's going to be lunch, and he finds the power within him to grab his own lightsaber and, save himself. He finds the power within him. This is the first time we're actually seeing him use his force powers since A New Hope. He finds the power within him and emerges and immediately has a vision, i.e. he's reconnected with that part of himself that was missing. He's more whole, and he sees Obi-Wan Kenobi that tells him to go to cave number 2.
To cave number 2.
Sir?
Literally, Empire Strikes Back should be subtitled A Tale of 3 Caves, because basically that's what it is.
Well, and he goes to the Underworld technically when he goes to the Cloud City too, so it's like another version of
Oh yeah, there's Underworld after that whole movie is
so much Underworld. But Obi-Wan's like, the treasure you seek is in another cave. To crib on Joseph Campbell. And so, you must go to the Dagobah system and seek out the Jedi Master who instructed me, Master Yoda. Yes. But do you see kind of how he found something within himself, the fear of death and dying in a spiritual way, in a symbolic way, induced Luke to live again?
For sure.
He was saved by his friend Han, who put him into the inside of a tauntaun, which is like a rebirth of sorts.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And then he goes in and he's in the Bacta tank floating like a little embryo or a little baby in his little Bacta tank. He definitely experienced a rebirth. All of the symbolism is there.
Multiple times in the one movie, which I know it's cliche to say that's your favorite Star Wars movie, but that's my favorite Star Wars movie, and it's because of many things, but the symbolism is heavy.
And sometimes
in that movie.
People
it's so good.
Don't know what they're playing with, but Gary Kirshner knew what he was playing with.
Sure seems like it. Like, I mean, how many, like you said, are we really going to have 3 caves in one movie? Yeah, we are. Because you need to understand the point, everybody, that this is the sad, scary middle chapter of the story.
Yeah.
And it's nothing but Underworld. So enjoy, everyone.
And this is where you have to face your darkest bits, right? Like, as they say, the sad, scary part of the journey. But if you haven't picked up what you're missing the first time you go into the Underworld, you have to go back again. He do go back.
Yes,
exactly.
Many times.
Let's talk about Dagobah. Dagobah is a swamp. It's moist.
I love Dagobah. Dagobah is
it lives
so interesting and symbolically
on the edge of life and death. And to that point, the Dagobah cave is part tree. In fact, John Williams always called it the magic tree. Part cave.
Yeah, it's part tree. Do you want me to talk about the weird spider thing?
Yeah.
Okay, so a while ago, my son and I did an episode on, I think it was an episode just on the Force itself or something. But I came across, well, I didn't come across, but there's a Ralph McQuarrie concept art painting of this very, very large white spider on Dagobah next to a tree. And since then, that painting has been used no less than 2 times, at least in visual media in Star Wars as inspiration, possibly other times, because I came across a note that said something about a Kessel, a mine spider or something. Or spice spider. I don't know anything about the spice spider, but believe you me, when I have time, I'm looking it up because that sounds interesting. But basically, this knobby white spider that was in a McQuarrie painting was mentioned in legends as being part of the life cycle of the gnarl trees. And the gnarl tree is the magic. That's what the magic tree is.
Yeah.
The cave/cave on Dagobah. So basically what happens is this spider, the roots of the tree develop these little knobs, which turn into spiders. And eventually when the tree, I guess, dies, the roots just get up and walk away. And
that's cool.
Isn't it? That's the knobby white spider. So every time I've watched Empire Strikes Back since I found that out, I look at this tree cave completely differently, because I'm like, there's a spider under the ground growing, and eventually, it's such a light side, dark side type of symbiotic relationship going on with this spider in this tree. But anyway, back to Dagobah and the Dagobah cave. I just thought that was interesting. That's kind of background. It's legends, but they've taken it out of legends now and put it back into canon. I love when they do that. Don't you love when they do that?
Yeah. They classified the Dagobah tree as virgins in the Force, which basically, for us who are trying to talk about it, mean that if you enter this tree, you are with the Force. You are in the Force. You are in sort of the realm of the collective unconscious, because the Force is everywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to tell you, but the collective unconscious, or at least the Force, can't show you anything but what you expect to see in some ways. It can show you a little bit, but think about the world between worlds and how Yoda reacts to Ezra being there in this like virtual liminal space with him. He asks him what he sees, and he says a field of stars, and Yoda's like, oh, that's interesting, because Yoda didn't see that, right?
Right.
It's only going to present to you what you have the brain mental capacity to see. Same with Mortis. Mortis is also a virgin in the Force, and it shows Anakin exactly what he needs to see, which is a really weird Shakespearean play about three people three times.
Right.
It's Bizarro land. Anyways, Dagobah itself, Luke senses it. He's like, it's dark in there. The dark side, it's cold. And Yoda warns him to only take in, the things with him.
He warns him not to take his weapon, or says you're not going to need your weapons, and he takes them anyway.
Yeah.
Because he's a silly boy.
He's a silly boy.
In this movie.
And
he doesn't listen to anybody in this movie.
In that moment, he finds his worst nightmare, which is the boogeyman, Darth Vader. But Darth Vader he kills him, he destroys him, and he ends up being him, which is, the thing that he didn't know he needed to fear. He really didn't know he needed to fear becoming Darth Vader. And
no, I don't think he did either. He just
like a warning to him.
Yeah. Now it's like it's like a paradox almost, that he didn't know he needed to be afraid of him being part of him, like literally biologically. But now he knows, and now he fears it. And in about a half an hour, he's going to find out, you actually do need to worry about that, actually.
The Force is telling him this like secret knowledge that he never knew. And that's how caves function. They are you entering into this underworld location. And much like the Force, it allows you to know the things that you've never realized. Joseph Campbell talks about how the underworld functions as a way of being the unconscious of ourselves. The things that we're not consciously aware of, it brings to the surface. And so the fact that, in a way, him being biologically connected to Vader and him being shown that is the darkness that he never knew existed. And
then in a little bit later in the movie, he has another vision, a very terrifying vision of his friends suffering. And he carries that fear just right on out with him. And again, they tell him, don't go. Nothing good is going to come of this. And he goes anyway because he's so afraid.
And
at that point,
he is sort of not actually transformed by the cave because, Yoda tells him he failed in the cave. This was a failure. You didn't actually learn anything from the cave. So he has to learn things the very, very hard way in the underworld of Cloud City on Bespin later.
What's I thought was really interesting is in the Empire Strikes Back short story book, there's like we talked about before we recorded.
From a certain point of view, right?
From a certain point of view, thanks. I couldn't remember the name of the book. It's sitting right in front of me, by the way, but I still couldn't remember it. There's a short story in there called Vergence, and it is by Tracy Dion, and it is told from the point of view of that tree cave, dark side tree cave on Dagobah, and it is such a good story. And the cave basically, it goes through its own history and how people used to come to the cave, the tree, and eventually the cave started to learn about human beings, and its favorite thing that it learned was that human beings always have fear, and it actually started to have a symbiotic relationship with the people that come to the caves because it found that it could feed on the fear and craved it. After a while, it started craving the fear, and so when people would come, it would be fed. And it really wasn't showing them, like you're saying, in Empire Strikes Back, it isn't showing them anything that isn't already inside them. It just knows how to manipulate it and make it bigger and amplified. And so it talks about later when Yoda started to show up at this cave. He came the first time, and the cave was really confused because he's like, "Well, there's really not a lot of fear for me to feed on here. It's fear for others, but not typical fears." And then the cave being very surprised when Yoda came back again and again and again and again. And it's just if you haven't read it, it's really, really fascinating. It's really, and it does eventually get to that appearance by Luke in Empire Strikes Back, which is also a really interesting part of the story. I won't spoil it, but very cool.
Later on, Leia and Han and Chewie and C-3PO are stuck in a cave, which is more like the belly of a whale, but it looks like a cave, which is really cool too.
They think it's a cave.
They think it's a cave, but it's actually the belly of a whale, and they flee it. They don't want to go through that transformation at that time.
Nope, it was just like a little sneak peek. You're gonna get eaten up later, but here's a fun time. Here's a little fun adventure. This is a little sneak peek at what's coming for you.
And that's why Empire Strikes Back is brilliant.
It is. It is.
It's nonstop Underworlds. It's really great. All right. Do you want to talk about what's your favorite next cave to talk about?
My favorite next cave to talk about. Well, I mean, the spider caves are near and dear to my heart because listen, I am nothing if not self-aware. I hate spiders. I'm sorry. I'm not enlightened about them at all. I understand they're good for the environment, but they need to stay outside. If they come in my house, I lose my mind. Okay. So the fact that I not just love Star Wars spiders, but I fixate. Like I have a Krikna coffee mug. I love them. So I get it. It's me working out my own fears about spiders and whatnot. I get it.
Eat that shadow.
Whatever. I'm eating my shadow. Okay. I'm doing a good job of it because I love the Krikna the most probably. But so in Star Wars Rebels, there are some very large, again, inspired by Ralph McQuarrie's concept art of the knobby white spider, but they gave them a new name and they took off a couple of legs. These guys are six-legged, which is real funny because if you look at the concept art from Rebels, they actually show you it's like a piece of art from, if you're looking down from up above the Krikna, it could not look more like an Imperial cog. Like that's what it looks like.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Because what are the rebels afraid of? the Empire. So perfect, right? Well done.
Mm-hmm.
Well done. I love that they did that. But so there's a couple of episodes that I wrote down the names of. Here they are. Mystery of Chopper Base is where we meet the Krykna. And then there's Steps into Shadow Part 1 and Holocrons of Fate. And the reason we're talking about spiders, because you're probably like, I thought we were talking about caves. We are talking about caves, but kind of goes hand in hand in this little storyline in Rebels, because also one of my favorites, Bendu, is involved in this storyline. Kanan and Ezra get their hands on a Sith holocron, and Ezra starts to go a little questionable at that point in time. He's getting a little bit dark-sidey, and it's kind of freaking out Kanan. So he takes a Sith holocron, he gives it to Bendu for safekeeping, and Bendu puts it inside the Krykna lair cave for quote-unquote safekeeping. Okay, Bendu. I don't know.
Again, that the treasure, the cave you fear has the treasure you seek.
Apparently, exactly. So at some point, they need to retrieve the Sith holocron because Maul wants it. Of course he does. And so they have to do it. Otherwise, he's going to kill the rest of the crew. So what's very interesting, how much do you love Bendu? I know it's not a Bendu episode, but how much do you love Bendu, Marie-Claire? Come on.
I mean, he's
Give it up.
Fascinating because he's
so
also because like he's like this creature that looks like the trees of the planet and is the one in the middle, and he's got an excellent voice.
He's just my idol. Let's be honest. I don't have my tattoo yet, but it's coming soon, late 2023, I think. Michelle's Bendu tattoo. Anyway, Bendu sticks the holocron inside of the Krykna cave. And the Krykna have, according to the rebels, been terrifying them since they tried to build their base on this planet. Really, they have not. Really, what's been happening is they see a spider and they lose their minds, much like myself. I guess I can't blame them because I scream and run away when I see a spider. But it's their planet, gosh darn it, you know?
Yep.
And all they do is freak out and start shooting at them. And then they wonder why they're getting attacked by the spiders. So Bendu basically explains this to Kanan, like, if you stop being aggressive at them, maybe they won't try to kill you, you know? And he's like, oh, okay. And that indeed turns out to be the case. And he, actually finds some communion with them. But Ezra has been trying to communicate with these spiders and just can't seem to, which is odd because he has like a kind of an animal affinity horsepower. So he's a little confused as to why he can't communicate with them, and Kanan can. But Kanan decides that Ezra needs to go into the cave to get the holocron on his own. And Ezra is like, "Are you insane? They're gonna literally eat me." And he's like, no, you'll be fine. So he starts to walk into the cave, and Kanan's like, leave your weapon here. And Ezra's like, again, are you crazy? And he's like, no, just leave it here. So poor Ezra gets sent into this cave where he thinks he's going to be eaten. He's very, very, very scared. And at some point, Kanan says, go to the left and you'll be fine. And Ezra's like, are you sure? I don't think that's right. And he goes to the right instead, which leads him right into a bunch of, it's a nest basically of Krykna now. So why he didn't listen, it's like, well, these kids not listening to their masters. I don't get it. But so eventually Kanan has to go in there with him, and together he teaches him. They have a moment in the cave where Ezra's feeling really guilty about being responsible for Kanan being blinded by Maul. And they have a really nice moment where Kanan says, it's not your fault. I've never blamed you ever. And Ezra gets a little weepy, and they hug, and it's very nice and sweet. So they had been having issues before that with Ezra getting a little dark-sidey, and Kanan not necessarily trusting him very much and being afraid of what was going on with his Padawan. So that was a very nice little transformational moment that they have in this cave. And eventually they find the holocron, which is just very cinematically sitting on the back of one of these Krykna spiders. And they work together to levitate it over to themselves and very peacefully walk out of the cave, and no more Krykna problems, because now they get each other. You know, they're not going to start shooting at them, and they're not going to eat them in return, which is nice. But I have to say, one of my favorite Bendu lines ever when they go into the cave together, he says, perhaps Master and Padawan will find balance again, or perhaps they will be eaten. Such is the way of things.
It truly
What a king. What a king.
He's great. So, like, part of what is really important in this is you might be spiritually dead, or you're trying to seek answers, and it's never going to turn out to be the answer, the treasure, the way forward is never going to turn out to be exactly what you went in thinking you needed. That's really, really key in Star Wars. It never is what you think you needed or what you desire.
Right.
Going on with Rebels, we also have that fabulous episode of The Honorable Ones with Kallus and Zeb, where they go and are stuck in the cave together fighting, and then have to rely on each other and find empathy with each other. I mean, headcanon or not, they become interconnected from an alchemical union perspective. And Kallus, this is the start of Kallus going forward, turning back towards helping the rebellion and becoming Fulcrum himself.
AKA Hot Kallus.
Hot Kallus.
Big time physical transformation, not just spiritual, and it's physical. He changes his look.
He just gets better hair.
He
gets better hair. He always had the mutton chops.
I don't know. I never found him attractive until he had that devil may care hairstyle change, and now he's Fulcrum, which is super hot. And married to Zeb, also super hot.
Also, yes, very great. Speaking of spiders, I did want to talk about one other spider that was in a cave, which is also really interesting, because caves typically in mythology are associated with snakes, which is actually the creature that leads Savage Opress to find his brother Maul as a spider in an underworld cave on the planet where it's like the garbage planet that you find out that Naboo like brings all their garbage to the same planet. And there's Maul cut in half, and he's had spider legs built for him. Morley is this snake that has been feeding Maul creatures, big and small, to survive inside of this cave within this garbage planet that looks kind of like hell. So like the underworld motif mixed with the cave itself is where we get this dead Maul who is reborn with all of this angst within him. And that's
really interesting.
Mentally okay.
No, not at all. And I find it interesting that you say that. It's usually, typically caves and snakes are the vibe.
But snakes are a psychopomp between the living and the dead. They go into the ground, right? So they are connected with the idea that they can go between the two worlds.
That's really interesting, though, because snakes and spiders, the number one and number two top phobias of people. Whenever there's a survey, those are 1 and 2 for sure, and they're very similar. I mean, spiders shed just like snakes do, and lots and lots of people really scared of spikes and snaders.
Yeah, spikes and snaders.
Snakes and spiders. Oh God.
Yeah,
I need some more tea.
They really are. Yeah. Exactly. And Maul from that point is brought back to Dathomir, brought into a different cave, reborn with new legs by his mother in the cave.
Oh man. See, there's a whole planet where there are other caves in that planet that are fascinating. Like the Night Sisters are buried when they die in a watery cave grave situation. That's really interesting.
Eventually, Maul uses a cave to try to get things out of Ezra and Sabine and Kanan to using the Night Sister magic. There's a lot of caves that surround Maul, and it's one of the reasons why I don't actually think he's dead and could come back.
Because he's just hanging around in too many womb caves? Is that the theory?
Well, he's also associated with the sun, and people specifically have talked about him being Sisyphus, right? And Sisyphus doesn't die. He's eternally punished. So you can't have an eternally punished person die. That's all.
He'll probably turn up again.
I mean,
he doesn't ever go away. It doesn't seem like.
It would be interesting if he showed up in Ahsoka as like a half dead thing.
Ooh.
Like a spooky.
That would be interesting.
God of the dead. Like
would
the sun
be
reborn. Because, I mean, you have Ahsoka who's like the goddess of the light. Where's the god of the dark? Where's the balance, Bendu lover?
I've liked that theory ever since you hatched it a few years ago. It does make a whole lot of sense.
It's still there. Next favorite cave, Michelle.
Oh man. Next favorite cave. Well, I'm gonna call on another spider cave that we haven't talked about yet, which is the one from The Mandalorian.
Oh, yeah.
Season 2, The Passenger. Frog Lady.
Frog Lady. Yeah.
Yay. That one's really interesting because it's literally a womb. There are eggs in this cave, both spider variety and frog variety together in the same cave. And it's an ice cave. Not N-I-C-E. I-C-E. It's an ice cave.
Yes.
It sounded like I said a nice cave. It's not a nice cave. It's actually quite scary.
She hung out in the hot spring there for a bit, though.
That's true. The hot tub. We'd called it the hot tub. But that one, that whole part of the season, it seemed like, because you can look at that episode and go, what's the transformation here? Other than literally having eggs hatching and actual animals coming out of the eggs that are trying to eat them. Again, they're trying to eat them. Yeah. But I feel like it's just it's like that whole section of the season is nature or the force or whatever trying to tell Din that you've got to give up this way of life. You've got to change. Like you have a child.
Right. Yeah.
And
there is a lot of that. You have to become a dad.
Right. Yeah. So the whole episode, Grogu's being naughty. And it gets them into a whole lot of trouble because he keeps eating the eggs and the babies. And I know we like to say that maybe John doesn't get this deep with things. Maybe it's an accident. But it seems like to me that episode with some more spiders and Grogu, like you can look at if you look at spiders and caves in Star Wars as a dark side thing, and you want to look at Frog Lady, who's clearly lovely and her eggs are well cared for and she's trying to have a happy life with her husband and whatnot as a light side thing, and you've got Grogu consuming both of them. It's not necessarily on the surface of 4C cave like the one on Dagobah or the one on Atollon, but I see something there. You know what I'm saying? Like it's interesting. And again, a little more on the surface, I think it's about Din coming to accept his responsibility as being a parent. Like you've got the Frog Lady who's a parent, and you've got Mama Spider who's a parent who's gonna eat you.
It's that episode, or maybe the one before, where he's like having Grogu like fix a part of the ship from the inside. Like I feel like it's connected to that part of like Din is making very dangerous decisions for Grogu, and like Frog Lady like sits him down and is like, "Hey, buddy, like us parents, we gotta do the responsible thing. And I need you to be responsible in this situation.
That's also the episode where I think they sleep 3 times. It's really it's very odd. Like they go to sleep 3 times in this episode, and
That's fascinating.
Sleeping, underworld, the whole thing. It's just I don't know if it was intentional.
Well, and from that point, from that episode on, like you see Grogu certainly have a better appreciation for life, and like he's even playing with like the little tadpoles and stuff like that, like in a nice way later. And but yeah, no, it's definitely that like Din has to like become a dad. You have to like accept this part of yourself, and he really doesn't until like end of the 3rd season. Like that's the conclusion of The Mandalorian. He becomes Dadalorian. Like that is the conclusion of it, which is really interesting.
It's like the universe, the Force, or whoever is just trying to really show him as many examples
his
of
place in all of this
responsible parenthood as it can. And yet they leave this planet with the Razor Crest and completely falling apart. Like his whole old life, his old way of life, it's falling apart, man. Pay attention.
I mean, like, eventually the universe just destroys the Razor Crest. So
exactly.
Yeah.
We don't talk about that though, because it still hurts me deeply.
I love the Razor Crest. I love the fact that it had a bed and it had a bathroom and like it had like a co-pilot seat. Like it was like the van.
It's a flying metal. It's a flying metal womb, and that's what it looks like.
Yeah, I know.
Physically.
Instead, he went for the race car.
But you know, he came around. And as far as being a parent,
he let Bo-Katan carry the mom van around. I guess it's fine. This is a side topic. Sorry about that.
Ships shaped like uteruses is a whole nother episode. There's a lot of them.
There is a lot of them. Just shout out to Obi-Wan Kenobi. He starts out in his meditation cave of sadness because he is spiritually dead at the start of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and it takes I think it's like 3 times that he needs to be convinced to leave to actually take the mission and go and rescue Leia. And sometimes that's just you're in the cave because you're actually spiritually dead. And when he gets back from this mission saving Luke and Leia, he actually builds a house, which is amazing. Good on you, Obi-Wan.
I loved that. I loved that he left his dead cave and actually built himself a little house. It's so good. And there's actually a shot in the episode 1. He's having a nightmare while he's sleeping in his cave, and he wakes up from the nightmare. And good on you, Deb, because there's a shot that actually looks like what an ultrasound picture looks like. It hit me right between the eyes. Like there's no way that was an accident. Like he's ruminating in this womb cave, and he's just not ready to come out yet. And he's gotta wake up.
And then Bad Batch has several, especially in the 2nd season. It's almost like they're always going underground to try and find buried treasure. There's a lot of like treasure in the depths, and what they find is never what they're looking for. It's always interconnected personal relationship stuff that they end up finding in the Bad Batch. I covered and shouted it out every single time when I covered Bad Batch with both you and Molly. So go and listen to those episodes. But highlights for me, of course, the Crosshair and Mayday episode where they where Crosshair and Mayday end up saving each other. And then it ends up becoming this transformational experience for Crosshair where he realizes he's been on the wrong path this whole time.
I just rewatched that today because I realized it had been a while, and I knew there was a cave. I just couldn't remember exactly like which part of the story. Yeah. And man, that's a heavy episode. It's so good.
It is. All right. Are you ready to talk about the caves of Ahch-To?
Oh, please do. Let's do it.
There is a lot of sexual symbolism in The Last Jedi. Star Wars The Last Jedi is packed full of sexual symbolism, but specifically Ahch-To, being the birthplace of the Jedi, has both light side caves, dark side caves, and those that balance between both. The library tree, the Jedi tree with the sacred texts in it, counts as a cave because it's hollowed out and it looks vaginal in nature.
What? No, I'm sure that was an accident, Marie Claire. I'm sure Rian Johnson would never do that on purpose.
There is the Prime Jedi cave where Rey is trying to find all of this understanding about and it's actually up on a hill too, which is really interesting. So that's like up on a hill. The tree is kind of mid. And then, of course, we have the dark side cave. But the Prime Jedi cave, which is filled with water, is where Luke kind of drops all this knowledge about the Jedi and the failures, and really is expressing a lot of his own fears about what went wrong and how he doesn't feel like he can come back from that. Unfortunately, because there are so many caves on Ahch-To, it functions as an underworld, and Luke Skywalker is never able to leave the underworld. He is permanently dead.
It's good that when he finally does his brave, very Jedi AF act, where he tries to both teach Ben and save the rebellion or the resistance, he's at least outside the cave. He's at least on the little outcropping. He's at least looking out into the ocean, and he's not, stuck inside that hiding place he's been hiding for.
Yeah, he's looking out
ever years
into the water and into the horizon, into the suns that he sees. Like, he's not stuck in his even the little huts are cave-like. Yeah.
By the way, I have full intentions and plans on going to that island next summer.
To Skellig-Mico?
So yeah, the plans are in the works.
That's great.
Wish me luck that it's going to be open to the public during the time that we're there.
And there's going to be good weather because you have to take a boat.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the dark side cave.
Let's.
Because
that's the good one.
It's the cave that she specifically fears to face. And she goes there because there's secret knowledge in there. And she falls through it and falls into the water, much like a baby into a womb. There's a skeleton in the bottom, which is really cool because that represents the subconscious, the unconscious, the things that we fear to face. She withdraws herself from the water all wet, or like newborn, and she faces the mirror cave, which is one of the coolest moments in all of Star Wars, where she goes off into eternity and tries to find the answers of which she seeks belonging. And she only sees herself, which of course Ryan has talked about was the thing that she feared the most, was that she didn't have a huge story. She was nobody. Right. She didn't have a fate involved. And the fate was truthfully what she made it. Whatever she would make it was her fate, which is a different sort of fate. You are a changer of worlds, Rey, not a person that has something destined for you.
You're not a product of where you come from. You're like say that quote again, because I'll get it wrong. The Joseph Campbell one. You're not gonna find mommy and daddy in this cave, babe. That's not what it's about.
The cave you fear holds the treasure you seek. The treasure she sought, she didn't know she needed, right? And that's always the key in Star Wars. You didn't know what you needed when you went into the cave. And she ends up finding Kylo Ren as a result.
I was just going to say, and then the first person she wants to tell this to is not her master, it's Kylo Ren. I will never forget. I will never forget how I felt when I realized she was not talking to Luke and she was talking to, I think my soul left my body. I've never had an experience like that.
Yeah,
in the
it was
movies
wild.
Ever. It was wild. Crazy. and
So
bold and
it
daring.
leads her down a very different path than she was expecting to be. And you can kind of see how, like, these caves, they're transformational and they do connect death. You go in sometimes spiritually dead, or you're about to die as symbolically dead, and you emerge either needing to go into another cave because you didn't learn the lesson or you didn't pick anything up, or you emerge a transformed person because you have been reborn. So what is important about death is that when you die spiritually, you still have all of the things that you have learned from when you lived or you were alive spiritually, and you can rearrange those things with the experiences within the dark. You can be regrown, reborn, because the caves themselves contain this primordial wisdom of the ages. It allows for the transformation, the miraculous transformation.
Star Wars caves are the best.
They absolutely
It's my
are
favorite.
The best.
It's my favorite metaphor in all of Star Wars. And that's why there's probably so many of them, because people writing this stuff, it's primordial, like you've said already a couple of times.
Well, and I don't know that
it's a Star Wars language that you don't have to tell people what this means. You know, we've seen it so many times at this point that, you know, characters in a cave, pay attention. Something important is happening.
And I don't know that, like, it's not just Star Wars language, it's humanistic language. Like, for the fact that this is supposed to be science fantasy, there's a lot of ancient symbols in it, right? Which is all purposeful. George is purposefully drawing on these symbols to tell you this is an old story. This is old language. This is something that is speaking to deep, deep, deep psychology of who we are and what is important to us as humans. And the most important thing is, like, we've mentioned a lot of characters, and most of them have been men that have gone into caves. Male characters who needed to be reborn. I think that Star Wars is saying that men don't know what it's like to be spiritually dead, and they need to be reminded that there is life after spiritual death.
Interesting. I didn't think about it. I didn't think about it in the terms of it's mostly men, but I'm trying to think of any. Omega, Rey, Frog Lady.
And again, it can happen to anyone. It's just Star Wars pulls on this a lot with men who need the symbol in front of their face that it's okay to need to be reborn. It's really okay.
And there's other examples of Kylo goes to the Dagobah cave.
Oh, in the comics, yeah.
Yeah. Yoda goes to the Dagobah cave in the Clone Wars.
Yeah, in his arc, and then he also goes fights his shadow self in a different cave.
Yeah. Just rewatched that a couple days ago too, prepping for this, and I was like, oh my gosh, I completely forgot that he went to that Dagobah cave in this arc, because I was only thinking about when he fights his shadow, but when he goes to the Dagobah cave initially, you know, basically Qui-Gon leads him there and says, you need to, if you want to be able to transform, as I have, and be able to communicate after death, you have some work to do, and it starts here. You have to go in and start dealing with your fear and all of your shadow and everything. So,
and too long didn't read of this episode is we can never be whole people if we have bits that we fear or our shadow selves left in the cave. We have to confront those pieces of ourselves and collect them and integrate them into ourselves so that we can become whole. Clarissa Piccola Estes in Women Who Run with the Wolves talks about collecting the bones and singing over them. And if we're too afraid of the bones that we have from our past and that we are now dead and aren't able to actually piece them together, right? We're not strong enough, or we haven't had the time. We need to give ourselves the space to be reborn basically.
It's a lot of, Colin likes to say ABA, like a lot of music form is part A, part B, back to part A.
Mhm.
It's actually the same exact process. You're
Life,
born,
death, life.
life, death, life. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So visit a
exactly.
cave every once in a while, guys. It's not bad.
And
Metaphorically.
yes, the dark is scary, but we need to go into the dark to be able to appreciate the light.
Yay. Bringing it home.
Bringing it home. This was fun. Thanks, Michelle.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me again.
This is awesome. So I'm going to continue on talking about the underworld whenever I can, because I love all these topics, and it's.
Ooh, what's the next topic? What are you thinking? What's the vibe for the next one?
I don't. So I'm thinking of another solo episode, specifically talking about Darth Vader and how he is stuck in the underworld.
Ooh, I'll tune in for that. Maybe.
And his mythological connection, who he is most like mythologically, and it's not who you think.
Will you be talking a little bit about Vader Immortal, maybe?
Yeah, Vader Immortal, the Charles Soule run of Vader. That was immediately set immediately after he's first in the armor. Yeah, where he builds his castle.
That is such a good series. Oh my goodness.
And also just in general, like who he represents from a mythic motif perspective. And then digging into more like how villains are just heroes stuck in the underworld waiting to come out.
Ooh, yeah. I love when you talk about that. That's such a cool, it's seriously such a cool perspective on villains that, even the ones that seem very single-minded and very non-dimensional, you can, if you think about it from that angle, it's a completely different experience.
Palpatine was once a baby.
Mm-hmm. And had a mom, probably. Well, we don't know for sure. He might have been immaculately dark side conceived or something weird.
He has a family on Naboo, and his estate faces the Nimbari estates across the lake.
When are we getting that story?
Right? Don't you want that story? Isn't that fascinating?
It's been 40 years, guys. Let us have that. I mean, how excited will you be? Exactly. Come on.
I would love it. I would love a Sheev-demption story, basically making us go like, maybe Sheev wasn't all that bad, or maybe I understand why he went to the dark side story. I'll write it.
Do it.
All right. That's everything for today. Thank you for listening. I hope you will recognize when you see a cave in Star Wars, you're about to see a transformation. Take care, everyone. Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to What the Force. I'm Marie-Claire Gould, your host. Our music is orchestral music by Christy Carew for What the Force. You can support the show directly on Patreon at patreon.com/whattheforce. We'd like to thank all our patrons, especially those who love and are obsessed with What the Force. John, In Wild Space, How Rude, Anna Perez, Neil, Christian Luca, Carly Ann, Scott C., and Susan. Support the show by wearing the Force with our merch. Like and subscribe on YouTube, or leave a 5-star review on iTunes or other pod apps. It helps others find the show. Connect with us on Twitter at WT4 Show, What the Force Podcast on Facebook. Our website is whattheforce.ca, or the Discord link is in the liner notes. Feel free to reach out and start a conversation. Cheers.